It was a crisp October morning in Atlanta when the heavy wooden doors of Fulton County Courthouse creaked open, letting in a cool breeze and a young boy who looked almost too small for the occasion. 8-year-old Elijah Brooks stepped inside holding the hand of his mother, Angela Brooks, a hard-working single parent who wore both pride and anxiety on her face. The courthouse loomed above them, not just in architecture but in significance. Today was a day that would change everything. Elijah wore a neatly pressed blue button-up shirt tucked into beige khakis, his dark curls freshly combed, his shoes polished until they gleamed. Despite his age, his demeanor was composed, calm, observant. There was a quiet sharpness in his eyes that had always unsettled adults who assumed intelligence only belonged to age. They were not at the courthouse for Elijah. Not officially. They were here for Angela's landlord dispute, an eviction trial that had dragged on for weeks. But Elijah, who had sat in on every legal consultation and read every court notice alongside his mother, had become something of an unofficial paralegal. In fact, he knew more about Angela's case than her overworked legal aid attorney did. In the courtroom, murmurs filled the air as Elijah took his seat at the plaintiff's table beside his mother. His feet didn't touch the floor, and yet he held himself like a man twice his age. Across the aisle, the landlord, Mr. Richard Grover, sat smugly with his attorney, confident that the outcome would be in their favor. Judge Harold D. Whitaker, a seasoned man with graying hair and an unwavering stare, entered and called the courtroom to order. He noticed Elijah immediately, not because of his size, but because of the aura he carried, like someone who knew exactly where he was and why it mattered. As the trial began, Angela's attorney, Ms. Lillian Marks, began her opening statement. But it wasn't long before Elijah leaned over, whispered something into her ear, and gently pointed to a document in her folder. She nodded uncertainly and followed his lead. The moment was subtle, almost invisible, but not to Judge Whitaker, who had spent decades reading people. Halfway through the landlord's testimony, things took a turn. Mr. Grover began to claim that Angela had failed to pay rent for 3 consecutive months, despite warnings and notices. Elijah, eyes narrowed, whispered again into Ms. Marks' ear. This time, she stood up, paused, and then surprised everyone. "Your Honor, with permission, I'd like to introduce a motion supported by newly discovered documentation." Judge Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "Granted." Ms. Marks handed the bailiff a series of printouts. They were time-stamped email receipts and bank transactions from Angela's online payment system, showing clear evidence that rent had been paid for 2 of the 3 months in question. The room shifted. Grover's attorney looked startled. So did Grover. Judge Whitaker read the documents slowly. "This is credible. Why wasn't this submitted before?" Ms. Marks hesitated, then glanced at Elijah. "Your Honor, it was brought to my attention just moments ago by Elijah Brooks." A stunned silence fell across the courtroom. "The boy?" the judge asked, tilting his head. Ms. Marks nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Whitaker peered over his glasses at Elijah, who sat still, expression steady. "Approach the bench," the judge said. Not to the attorney. To Elijah. Angela looked at her son, alarmed, but he gently squeezed her hand and stood. As he walked forward, the courtroom held its breath. "State your name for the record," the judge instructed. "Elijah Isaiah Brooks," he said clearly. "You understand you're not a sworn attorney, nor a legal witness." "Yes, Your Honor. I just wanted the truth to be seen." The judge leaned in. "And how did you come across these documents?" "I helped my mom scan all her payment receipts and bank records. I remembered the transactions because I double-checked them. When I saw what Mr. Grover said today, I knew it wasn't right." Whitaker leaned back, looking at the boy as though seeing a puzzle he hadn't quite figured out yet. "You understand the seriousness of this hearing?" "I do, sir. My mom could lose our home." The judge gave a slow nod. "You may return to your seat." As Elijah walked back, the courtroom burst into murmurs. The jury exchanged looks of disbelief. Even Grover's attorney sat stunned, rechecking the documents. Back in his chair, Elijah opened his mother's file folder and quietly organized the next set of documents. Judge Whitaker watched him for a long moment before returning his gaze to the front. "We will recess until after lunch. Both parties are to return at 1 p.m. sharp." The gavel struck. As people stood and whispered, reporters in the back of the courtroom scribbled furiously. Word had already begun to spread. An 8-year-old just shook a courtroom. And the day was far from over. After the recess, the courtroom filled quickly, buzzing with quiet speculation. Word had traveled fast. A child had corrected a legal misstatement in front of a judge and had been right. By the time the clock struck 1, there were more people in the room than before. Reporters had taken their seats. Curious court clerks lingered near the back. Even a few off-duty attorneys found excuses to observe the afternoon session. Elijah Brooks sat quietly beside his mother, reviewing documents in her folder once again. He looked more like a scholar than a schoolboy, his small fingers brushing through court printouts and annotated notes. Angela tried to calm her nerves, but she couldn't help glancing at her son in awe. He didn't seem anxious. He looked ready. When Judge Whitaker re-entered the courtroom, he didn't bang his gavel immediately. He paused, surveying the room. "It appears we have gained an audience," he remarked with a note of curiosity. "Let us proceed." Mr. Grover's attorney, clearly rattled by the morning's events, launched into a more aggressive defense, attempting to discredit Angela's payment records by suggesting they were incomplete. "Your Honor, while the documents presented earlier appear legitimate, I argue they don't account for all necessary charges, late fees, maintenance bills, and other tenant obligations. Ms. Brooks still owes a balance." Angela's lawyer, Ms. Marks, looked uncertain again. But before she could rise, Elijah leaned close and whispered once more. She blinked, clearly impressed, and stood. "Your Honor, again with the court's indulgence, my young associate." "You may proceed, Ms. Marks," Judge Whitaker said, hiding a hint of a smile. "We'd like to submit detailed accounting sheets sent directly by the landlord's property manager. They confirm that Ms. Brooks' total balance, including late fees, was paid in full as of the date listed." The bailiff retrieved the new documents. Grover shifted in his seat uncomfortably. He leaned in to whisper to his attorney, but his voice was just loud enough for Elijah to hear. "This kid is making you look bad." Judge Whitaker reviewed the documents slowly. Then he looked up. "Counselor, do you have an objection to these figures?" Grover's attorney sighed. "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Then it seems we are no longer debating overdue payments." Whispers filled the courtroom again. From the back row, a young journalist scribbled the words "Child legal prodigy uncovers critical evidence." But Elijah wasn't done. As the trial continued, he picked up on inconsistencies in Grover's maintenance records. He whispered urgently to his mother, who nudged Ms. Marks. Reluctantly, the attorney stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to draw attention to several maintenance requests Ms. Brooks submitted, which were never fulfilled. The landlord cited damages caused by the tenant, but we believe these damages resulted from negligence in response time." Judge Whitaker leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" Elijah stood, holding up a printed spreadsheet and time-stamped photographs. The judge paused. "Ms. Marks, is this the child's work again?" "Yes, Your Honor. He organized all of it." The courtroom froze. "Bring it forward," said the judge. Elijah stepped to the front again, passing the evidence to the bailiff. The photos showed clear timestamps, mold forming under a leaky pipe, a cracked ceiling left unpatched for months, a broken stair that had caused Angela to twist her ankle. The spreadsheet cross-referenced every complaint with dates and emails sent. The jury whispered among themselves, eyebrows raised. Juror number 5, a young woman in business attire, shook her head in disbelief. Juror number 3, an older man in glasses, leaned forward to study Elijah more closely. "Your Honor," said Ms. Marks, "these photographs were taken by Elijah. He documented everything as his mother endured ongoing neglect." Judge Whitaker sat back slowly. This court has seen many cases involving poor housing conditions. Rarely has it seen this level of documentation, especially not from a child. Elijah returned to his seat without saying a word. His mother gripped his hand tightly. As the day wore on, a rhythm began to form. The defense attempted to corner Angela, and Elijah quietly offered Ms. Marks precise rebuttals. From code violations to email chains, he seemed to anticipate every question. The boy had memorized the structure of the case. During a short recess, Judge Whitaker called a private meeting with both attorneys in his chambers. When they returned, the judge looked more intrigued than ever. "This court is under no illusions," he announced. "We are not evaluating whether a child can practice law. We are evaluating whether the truth has been presented clearly and fairly." He turned to Grover's attorney. "At this point, I strongly suggest you re-evaluate your position." That night, news stations across the city aired the clip of Elijah stepping forward with legal documents in hand. Social media buzzed with headlines. 8-year-old legal genius defends mother in court and wins the jury's heart. Young boy's courage exposes landlord negligence in eviction trial. Future attorney. Georgia boy leaves courtroom speechless, ***. Back at home, Elijah was not watching the news. He was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring. Angela stood behind him, phone buzzing non-stop with messages from reporters, distant relatives, and strangers offering support. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently. He looked up and smiled. "I just want to help. That's all." Angela nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "You did more than help." But the case was not over. The judge had yet to deliver his verdict. And tomorrow, Elijah would be called to the stand. Morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the courthouse, casting bright patches across the courtroom floor. A hush fell over the spectators as Judge Whitaker entered and took his seat. The third day of the trial had drawn even more attention. Local media vans lined the street. The courtroom was packed. Everyone knew today was different. Today, the boy would speak. "Call your next witness," Judge Whitaker instructed. Ms. Marks rose, steady but composed. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we would like to call Elijah Brooks to the stand." A few quiet gasps rippled through the crowd. Angela squeezed her son's hand as he stood. Clad in his neat blue shirt and khaki pants, Elijah walked confidently to the witness stand. A step stool had already been placed so he could sit comfortably. The bailiff approached. "Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," Elijah replied, his voice clear. Ms. Marks stepped forward. "Elijah, can you tell the court your full name and age?" "Elijah James Brooks. I'm 8 years old." "Elijah, you've been helping with your mother's case. How did you get involved?" He looked out over the jury box, speaking with practiced calm. "When the eviction notice came, my mom was really upset. I asked her what was wrong, and she said we might lose our home. I wanted to understand why. So I started reading about tenant rights and housing laws. I used my school tablet." A juror's pen paused mid-sentence. A reporter dropped his notepad. "Did anyone tell you to do this?" "No. I just didn't want my mom to cry anymore." Angela covered her mouth, eyes shimmering with tears. Ms. Marks handed him a few documents. "Can you identify these?" Elijah nodded. "These are the emails my mom sent to the landlord asking for repairs. And this is the spreadsheet I made showing when she sent them and how long it took to get an answer." He explained each document with calm clarity, using terms like response lag, repair obligation, and code violation. The courtroom remained silent, enraptured by every word. Ms. Marks stepped back. No further questions. Judge Whitaker looked to the defense. "Would you like to cross-examine the witness?" Grover's attorney stood reluctantly. He approached Elijah with a forced smile. "Elijah, it's very impressive what you've done. But you're not a lawyer, are you?" "No, sir. I want to be one when I grow up, though." "You do understand that laws are complicated? That even adults struggle with legal language?" "Yes, sir. That's why I read the Georgia State Tenant Guide. Twice." The jury chuckled. The attorney frowned slightly. "But you might have misunderstood some of the clauses, yes?" Elijah paused, then responded carefully. I checked the parts one didn't understand with the legal aid website. And when I still wasn't sure, I used something called statutory interpretation. It means looking at how the law has been used before. The courtroom stirred. The judge raised an eyebrow. That will be enough, the defense attorney muttered and retreated. Judge Whitaker leaned forward. Elijah, thank you. You may step down. As Elijah returned to his seat, the courtroom erupted into soft applause before the bailiff called for order. Ms. Marks proceeded with calling her final witness, a local housing inspector who confirmed that Angela Brooks' unit had numerous unresolved safety issues. The jury listened attentively, but many kept glancing toward Elijah. At the end of the day, the judge gave instructions and announced that the jury would begin deliberation in the morning. Back home, Elijah stared at the ceiling from his bed. Mom. Yes, baby. Do you think I messed up? She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing a hand through his short curls. No. You stood up for us. You stood up for what's right. I have never been prouder. He smiled faintly. Do you think the jury liked what I said? Angela kissed his forehead. I think they saw something very rare today. Truth. The next morning, the jury returned after only 2 hours. The courtroom braced as they filed in. The foreperson, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, held the verdict slip. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? Judge Whitaker asked. We have, Your Honor. Please read it aloud. The woman cleared her throat. In the matter of Grover Realty versus Angela Brooks, we, the jury, find in favor of the defendant, Ms. Angela Brooks. We further recommend that the plaintiff be investigated for neglect and unlawful eviction practices. Gasps filled the courtroom. Elijah stared, wide-eyed. Angela wept. Judge Whitaker rapped his gavel once. The court thanks the jury for their service. Ms. Brooks, your eviction is nullified. Mr. Grover, you are advised to consult legal counsel. Reporters surged forward as the Brooks family was ushered into a side room. Later that afternoon, Judge Whitaker made a rare public statement. In all my years on the bench, I have never seen a minor present such composure, legal understanding, and moral clarity. Elijah Brooks is a reminder that justice is not about age. It is about courage. The courtroom victory had settled like a calm after a storm. Angela Brooks had won her case. The eviction was overturned. The judge had praised her son publicly, and the jury had unanimously defended their right to stay in their home. But what followed was something none of them had anticipated. By the time Elijah and Angela reached home that evening, their front porch was stacked with flowers, notes, and small packages. Neighbors had left baked goods and handwritten cards. One note read, "You gave us all hope today." Angela clutched Elijah's hand. This is all for you." Elijah picked up a small card that read, "Asterisk, to the little lawyer who won our hearts." Asterisk. But not everything was peaceful. Across town, Grover Realty faced an onslaught of bad publicity. The judge had ordered a formal inquiry into their property maintenance practices, and a city council member had launched a motion to audit their past eviction cases. Meanwhile, the media storm gathered strength. Within 48 hours, Elijah's story was featured on local news. Then national outlets picked it up. CNN, NPR, even a brief mention on the evening edition of the BBC. Reporters began camping outside their home. Cameras rolled as Angela led Elijah to school. But even at school, things had changed. Is it true you told off a judge? Are you going to be a real lawyer now? Can you help my mom with our landlord? Elijah was overwhelmed, but he remained gracious. He spoke politely, kept his head down, and returned to his classroom duties. That Friday, the school principal invited Angela and Elijah into her office. "We received a call from the State Bar Association," she said with a smile. "They want to meet Elijah. Not as a student, as an honored guest." Angela's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "They want to recognize his contribution to the understanding of housing law. And they're starting a youth scholarship fund in his name." The next week, Elijah stood before hundreds of attorneys in a downtown convention center. He wore a navy blue suit and stood behind a podium almost as tall as him. "I didn't mean to become famous," he said shyly into the microphone. I just didn't want to see my mom cry. That's all. I think laws are supposed to help people, not scare them." Thunderous applause followed. Angela watched from the front row, heart full. But with praise came pressure. Elijah's face became a symbol. Media invitations poured in. A major talk show offered to fly the family to New York. A law firm hinted at funding Elijah's education through to law school. Angela consulted Ms. Marks. "What do I do? He's just a kid." "Keep him grounded," Ms. Marks replied. "Let him be a child. The rest will come in time." So Angela decided, no national tours, no book deals, no Hollywood pitches. Not yet. Elijah would go back to school. He would have his childhood. However, one opportunity she couldn't turn down came quietly, through a letter. From the office of Justice Monroe, Georgia Supreme Court *. "Dear Ms. Brooks, *, we were deeply moved by the contributions of your son. We would be honored if Elijah could visit the state Supreme Court chambers and meet with justices interested in youth civic engagement. Please know this is not a media event. Only a private meeting to show our admiration. *. With utmost respect, Justice Lauren Monroe." They accepted the invitation. Elijah, now more composed but still very much an 8-year-old, stood in the high-ceiling halls of the state courthouse a week later, gazing at portraits of past justices. Justice Monroe met him herself. "Elijah," she said, kneeling to meet his eye level, "you reminded us what this job is really about." "Justice?" he asked. "Yes. And listening. Sometimes we forget to listen to those with the clearest view." She handed him a small wooden gavel, engraved with his name. "One day," she said, "this might not be a symbol. It might be your tool." Back home, life gradually returned to normal. Elijah continued to read about law in the evenings, but also played video games, helped his mother cook, and rode his bike. Angela took a second job at a non-profit legal clinic. Inspired by Elijah's courage, she had enrolled in a part-time paralegal course. "If my son can do it," she often joked, "so can I." The court victory had planted more than just hope, it had ignited a path. Months later, Elijah was invited to speak at a youth leadership conference. This time, he was ready. He stood behind the podium in a packed auditorium. Lights overhead, applause ringing. "I used to think adults knew everything," he began. "But then I learned something important. Knowing the law doesn't mean you're always right. And being a kid doesn't mean you're always wrong." He paused, smiling. "Justice belongs to everyone, even kids." The crowd rose in a standing ovation.